In an age when the world was young and rivers were worshipped as gods, a king rose, believing he could command water and destiny. His name was Ardashir, son of a shepherd, born beneath a sky streaked red by a comet that frightened priests and stirred whispers. He would one day rule an empire from burning deserts to cedar-clad mountains. But his story began in dust and hunger. His village clung to a great river, whose floods gave life and whose droughts brought despair. As a boy, Ardashir watched his father kneel in the mud, hands cracked, praying for waters that came too late. He learned early that gods were silent, and survival belonged to those who dared to act. When raiders from the north descended, it was not gods who drove them back, but villagers led by Ardashir's father. The boy saw steel flash, heard the clash of bronze and bone, and felt fear harden into resolve. His father fell in that skirmish, struck through by a spear, but the raiders were repelled. That night, beside the funeral pyre, Ardashir swore he would never again kneel in helpless prayer. Years passed, and famine returned. The river failed, fields cracked, and elders argued over sacrifices. Ardashir, now a young man, spoke of canals and reservoirs, of forcing the river to serve the people. The elders mocked him. Water, they said, belonged to the heavens. So he gathered the desperate, the widowed, the hungry, the angry, and began to dig. It was backbreaking work beneath a pitiless sun. But slowly the earth yielded. A channel carved by human hands diverted water into parched land. When the next flood came, it filled the canals. Crops rose where dust had ruled. Those who once mocked him now spoke his name with reverence. Word of the young canal maker reached King Beltharin, whose palace stood in a city of walls so vast they imprisoned the horizon. The palace was a labyrinth of painted halls and perfumed chambers. Ardashir walked its corridors in plain wool, surrounded by silk and gold. He saw courtiers who smiled with painted lips and eyes that measured him like livestock. He knelt before the throne but did not bow his head. "You have bent the river," Beltharin said, voice thin but sharp. "Can you bend men as well?" Ardashir answered without hesitation. "Men bend more easily than rivers, my king. They are moved by fear, by hunger, and by hope." The old king laughed. "And which do you offer?" "Hope," Ardashir replied, though he knew fear was often stronger. Beltharin made him overseer of royal works. Under Ardashir's command, canals spread like veins across the kingdom. Granaries filled. Trade flourished. The people prospered. And with prosperity came loyalty not to the aging king, but to Ardashir. In the palace, envy grew like mold in shadow. Prince Samiros, Beltharin's son, watched Ardashir's influence expand. Where once crowds cheered the prince's procession, now they whispered of the canal maker who had risen from nothing. Samiros sought allies among courtiers who feared change. Chief among them was Zarin, the king's chief priestess. She saw in Ardashir a threat to the ancient order, for if men believed they could master rivers, they might cease to fear the gods. One evening, Samiros and Zarin conspired. "He must fall," the prince said, pacing like a caged lion. Zarin's dark eyes gleamed. "The people love him. Open force would make him a martyr." "Then we use shadow," Samiros replied. They whispered of forged omens and poisoned words. Soon, rumors crept through the city like rats in the dark. The floods had grown erratic. A plague had struck a distant province. These were signs. The priests murmured that the gods were angered. Beltharin, frail and increasingly ill, wavered. He summoned Ardashir once more. "The priests say you defy the heavens," the king said. "They claim disaster follows in your wake." Ardashir met his gaze steadily. "Disaster followed us long before I was born. I have only tried to lessen it." The king studied him for a long moment. "I am old," he whispered. "When I am gone, my son will rule. He does not trust you. Then I will serve him as I served you," Ardashir said, though he knew Samiros' hatred ran deep. Beltharin died within the month. The city wailed. Samiros ascended the throne amid golden banners and forced smiles. On the first day of his reign, he confirmed Ardashir in his post. On the 7th, he accused him of treason. The charge was absurd, that Ardashir had diverted grain to his own followers, building a private army. Witnesses bought and frightened testified. Zarian proclaimed that the gods demanded justice. Ardashir stood in chains before the court. He had helped enrich. He could see doubt in some faces, fear in others. Samiros leaned forward on the throne. "Confess," the young king demanded, "and I may grant you mercy." "I have nothing to confess," Ardashir said. "I served this land. If that is treason, then I am guilty." The sentence was exile beyond the eastern desert, a land of salt flats and wandering tribes. Many expected him to perish within weeks. But deserts breed hard men. Ardashir survived sandstorms and thirst. He found refuge among nomads. He shared his knowledge of irrigation, showing them how to draw hidden water from beneath the sands. In return, they taught him the art of mounted warfare and the value of swift, decisive action. Years passed. Under Samiros, the kingdom faltered. The canals were neglected, overseers replaced by favorites. Famine returned. Border tribes tested the kingdom's defenses and found them weak. In the desert, Ardashir had not been idle. The nomads, once scattered, united under his leadership. He did not claim kingship, they gave it to him. They saw in him a man who could turn wasteland into home. When the time came, he rode west at the head of a force hardened by hardship. They moved like a storm across the frontier, seizing fortresses whose garrisons surrendered without fight. Villages opened their gates, remembering the man who had once brought them water. Samiros raged in his palace. "He dares return," he shouted, striking a goblet from the table. But his generals hesitated. Many had served under Ardashir in earlier days. Some secretly admired him still. The two armies met on a plain where dry grasses whispered in the wind. Samiros' troops outnumbered the nomads. Ardashir's force was leaner, clad in leather and resolve. Before the battle, Ardashir rode along his lines. "We fight not for plunder," he called, "but for a land where hunger does not rule. Stand with me, and we will build such a land." The clash was fierce. Arrows darkened the sky. Horses screamed. Steel met steel. At the height of the struggle, a contingent from Samiros' left flank turned and joined Ardashir, their loyalty shifting. Samiros watched from a chariot, disbelief etched on his face as his lines buckled. Ardashir cut his way through the chaos, seeking the king. When they faced each other at last, dust and blood mingling, "You should have died in the desert," Samiros spat. "The desert taught me how to live," Ardashir replied. Their duel was brief and brutal. Samiros, trained in ceremony more than survival, fell beneath Ardashir's blade. The city gates opened once more. Ardashir entered not as overseer, but as conqueror. Yet he did not plunder or burn. He restored the canals, reformed the granaries, and summoned the priests not to punish them, but to bind them into a new order. Zarian was brought before him, her once commanding presence diminished but not broken. "Will you execute me?" she asked, chin raised. "No," Ardashir said. "Serve the people, and you may yet serve the gods." Under his rule, the kingdom became an empire. Trade routes extended beyond mountains and seas. Scholars gathered in the capital to record laws and map the stars. For a time, it seemed Ardashir had achieved his dream, yet empires, like rivers, are never still. Beyond the Western Sea, another power was rising. To the north, a confederation of warrior clans forged alliances through marriage and blood oath. And within the palace, Ardashir's own sons grew, each with ambitions of his own. On the night of his 60th year, Ardashir climbed the highest tower of his palace. Below him, the city glowed with torchlight. The canals shimmered like silver threads. He thought of the shepherd's hut where he was born, of the desert winds, of the battlefield where he had taken a crown. He had bent rivers and men. He had built and destroyed. But he knew that history was a tide no single king could command forever. In the darkness beyond the city walls, riders moved silently, bearing messages between rival princes. Across the sea, ships unfurled their sails toward new horizons. The world was widening. And already, in shadowed corridors and distant courts, the next great stories of the ancient world were beginning to unfold. The Western Sea was a mystery to Ardashir's empire. They called it the Endless Mirror, reflecting the sky perfectly, as if sailing between two heavens. Beyond lay lands of rumor, cities on cliffs, markets with tin and purple dye. and kings measuring power in fleets, not grain. In Tyros, where cedar masts crowded the harbor like a forest, a child was born the year Ardashir claimed his throne. His name was Malek, son of a shipwright. He grew up with salt in his hair, watching ships depart and return, laden with silver and stories. Tyros owed no allegiance to Ardashir, a maritime confederation. They were merchants first, warriors second, turning ships into weapons when threatened. Their council of elders ruled by negotiation and coin, not by decree. Malek's father taught him the craft of shaping hulls. A ship must bend with the waves, he would say, or the sea will break it. Malek listened, but his heart yearned, not for building ships, but for commanding them. At 16, a fleet returned from the east with tales of Ardashir's empire canals, turning deserts green, markets overflowing with grain. They have more wheat than they can eat, one sailor boasted, and gold stacked in temples like bricks. The elders of Tyros listened. Prosperity across the sea meant opportunity. Soon trade missions were planned. Malek, barely a man, secured a place on one of the ships, more through stubbornness than favor. The voyage was long and perilous. They skirted storms that swallowed lesser vessels and navigated by stars. When they reached Ardashir's realm, they beheld something astonishing. Harbors organized with precision, warehouses aligned, guards disciplined. Ardashir, ever pragmatic, welcomed trade. He understood that empires thrived not only on conquest but on exchange. Malek saw the emperor once from a distant and aging figure, standing beside a canal as if inspecting a child's toy. The trade agreement enriched both sides. Cedar and glass flowed east. Grain and woven textiles flowed west. Tyros prospered, and Malek with it. By 30, he commanded his own vessel, the Sea Falcon, known for its speed and daring. Yet prosperity breeds envy as surely as famine breeds revolt. Within Tyros, factions formed. Some elders favored deeper ties with Ardashir's empire, envisioning a partnership. Others feared dependency. Chief among the skeptics was Elder Dagon, whose son had died in a distant port. He spoke of sovereignty and warned against entanglement. Malek found himself drawn into politics. He believed in alliance. The empire is strong, he argued. To stand beside it is to share its strength. Dagon's eyes narrowed. And when it turns that strength against us, empires do not share power, they consume it. The debate simmered unresolved, even as events forced decisions. To the north of Ardashir's empire, warrior clans unified under Korvan. He valued conquest over cultivation. His people thrived on plunder and tribute. Word reached Tyros that Korvan's forces were pressing southward. Ardashir's eldest son, Prince Naram, commanded the northern armies. Brave and charismatic, he was beloved by soldiers. But impatient with diplomacy, he viewed Tyros as a potential asset, one that could provide ships to outflank Korvan's allies. Envoys arrived in Tyros, bearing gifts and veiled demands. Naram sought naval support. In exchange, he offered favorable trade terms and military protection. The council was divided. Malek argued fiercely. If Korvan breaks the empire, he will not spare us. Better to fight beside a known ally than face an unknown conqueror. Dagon countered. And if we lend our fleet, we become a target. Korvan will see us as enemies. Our harbors will burn. In the end, fear of isolation outweighed fear of alliance. Tyros agreed to send ships under Malek's command. When Malek sailed east again, it was not with merchants, but with warriors. Imperial soldiers boarded his vessels. Malek observed Prince Naram. During strategy councils, the prince's confidence bordered on arrogance. Yet he listened to Malek's advice. They devised a plan. Naram would engage Korvan inland, while Malek's fleet would strike along the coast, severing supply lines. The campaign began with swift success. Malek's ships appeared at dawn, before unsuspecting harbors, launching coordinated assaults. Ports fell one by one, but Korvan was no fool. He adapted quickly, sending fast raiding parties to harass the fleet, and spreading rumors that Tyros had betrayed the coastal peoples for imperial gold. In one captured city, Malek encountered Alira, daughter of a northern chieftain. She had been taken hostage, proud and defiant. She refused to bow, even when brought before Prince Naram. Malek, assigned to guard her, found himself intrigued by her fierce composure. She spoke of Korvan not as a tyrant, but as a unifier who protected northern traditions. "You fight for a king who would swallow your city," she told Malek. "Do you think he sees you as equal?" Malek hesitated. "Ardashir welcomed us as partners." Alira smiled sadly. "Old kings speak of partnership. Young princes dream of dominion." Her words lingered. Meanwhile, inland, Naram faced Korvan in a decisive battle. Initial reports were favorable, but then silence fell. Messengers stopped arriving. Smoke rose on the horizon, but from which camp, none could say. Then came grim news. Naram had been wounded, his forces driven back. Korvan was advancing toward the coast. Malek had a choice: retreat to Tyros and preserve his ships, or hold position and risk annihilation to buy time. He chose to stay. Using narrow inlets and hidden coves, he positioned his ships where larger northern vessels could not maneuver. When Korvan's hastily assembled fleet approached, expecting an easy victory, they found themselves funneled into traps. Arrows rained from cliffs where imperial archers lay concealed. Fireships drifted into enemy lines. The sea became a furnace. Korvan, observing from shore, realized too late that he had underestimated the mariners. Though many of Malek's ships were damaged, the northern fleet was shattered. Inland, Naram regrouped and launched a counterattack. Korvan's momentum faltered. He withdrew northward. Victory celebrations erupted in both the Empire and Tyros. Naram publicly praised Malek, calling him brother of the sea. Trade flourished anew. Yet beneath triumph lay seeds of future conflict. Naram, emboldened by war, began advocating for tighter integration of Tyros into the Empire joint garrisons, standardized taxes. To him, it was logical consolidation. To many in Tyros, it felt like encroachment. Elder Dagon's faction gained strength. Today, joint garrisons, he warned. Tomorrow, Governor's Malek found himself torn. He respected Naram and believed in cooperation, yet he sensed the shifting tone. Complicating matters further was Alira. During the war's aftermath, she had been released as part of a truce. Before departing, she sought Malek out. "You fight well," she said quietly, "but wars do not end with battles. They end when hearts change." "And have ours?" Malek asked. She looked toward the horizon. "Yours, perhaps. I do not know about your princess." She left him with questions. Back in Ardashir's capital, age weighed heavily on the emperor. News of Naram's wounds troubled him deeply. He saw in his son both strength and dangerous ambition. His younger sons watched Naram's popularity with wary eyes. The empire stood at a crossroads. Externally, threats repelled. Internally, ambitions simmered. Ardashir summoned Naram and his brothers to court. He also invited representatives from Tyros, including Malek, in the vast audience hall. Beneath carved reliefs, Ardashir addressed them. "We have survived storms, but the greatest storms are those within." He proposed a bold vision, a league of realms bound by mutual law. A codified alliance, guaranteeing autonomy while ensuring collective defense and shared trade standards. It was an unprecedented idea. Some saw wisdom, others saw weakness. Naram bristled. "Father," he said, "unity requires strength at the center. Too much autonomy invites fracture." Ardashir's gaze lingered on his son. "Strength without trust invites rebellion." The council adjourned without resolution. In private corridors, whispers multiplied. Certain nobles, fearing loss of influence, began plotting. In Tyros, hardliners prepared for imperial overreach. To the north, Korvan rebuilt his forces, nursing vengeance. Malek returned to his ship uneasy. He had fought for alliance, but now he sensed alliances could be as fragile as sails. One night, as torches flickered, an assassin slipped through shadows. His target was Naram, the Empire's future. The blade struck swiftly. Chaos erupted. Guards chased a fleeing figure, who vanished into darkness. Naram survived, but barely. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Was it northern revenge, a Tyrian extremist, or an internal rival? Ardashir, beside his son's blood-stained bed, understood that the age of simple battles was over. The conflicts to come would not always be fought on open plains or burning seas. They would unfold in whispered promises, in betrayals masked as loyalty, in choices made by men like Malek. Beyond the palace, the endless mirror shimmered under moonlight, indifferent to the ambitions of kings. Ships continued to sail, carrying goods and rumors alike, and in the hearts of rulers and rebels, love for homeland, hunger for power, and fear of loss intertwined. Threads that would weave the next great chapter of the ancient world. The northern clans had retreated beyond the jagged mountains, nursing wounds and grievances, their ambitions simmering like embers beneath snow. Korvan, their leader, was not a man to forgive or forget. In his stronghold of stone and timber, he convened a council of chieftains. Korvan spoke with the certainty of a man who had tasted both blood and betrayal. "We were beaten," he said, "but not destroyed. The empire grows fat and complacent. They think victory ensures loyalty. We will show them the folly of their pride." Plans of retaliation were set in motion. Raiders trained in stealth and archery would infiltrate the empire's borderlands. Alliances would be sought with distant rulers who had grievances against Ardashir's expanding influence. Korvan understood that war in the open was costly. Subtlety, cunning, and betrayal could achieve what brute force could not. Meanwhile, in Ardashir's court, the atmosphere had grown tense. Naram, recovering from his assassination attempt, had become cautious, bordering on paranoid. Trust was now a currency more valuable than gold. Malek, representing Tyros, found himself constantly navigating between diplomacy and vigilance. Even as trade flourished, spies whispered in shadowed halls, and each council meeting was shadowed by suspicion. One evening, Malek was summoned to the palace gardens by Naram himself. Moonlight spilled over ornate fountains and carefully trimmed hedges. "I need your counsel," Naram said, his voice quieter than usual. "The northern clans will return, and I fear they will not come alone. I cannot trust all my generals. The empire may face an enemy within and without." Malek considered carefully. "We cannot meet force with force alone," he said. "Korvan's men are skilled, but they rely on surprise. If we can anticipate their moves, prepare the people, and secure the borders discreetly, we may turn their cunning against them." Naram nodded. "I would have Tyros support us again. Your fleet is unmatched. But this time, we need more than strength. We need spies, informants, a network that can detect betrayal before it strikes." Thus began a new chapter of preparation. Malek traveled between coastal cities, training sailors in intelligence gathering and covert maneuvers. He worked with courtiers and merchants to plant subtle signals, messages hidden within trade shipments, so that any northern agent could be detected. Tyros became a hub, not just of commerce, but of vigilance. In the empire's heart, Ardashir observed these developments with careful attention. He knew that battles of swords and arrows were easier to predict than the human heart, which could be swayed by fear, envy, or ambition. He began to mentor his younger sons more rigorously, teaching them the subtleties of negotiation. Yet even as preparations were underway, love and rivalry intertwined. Elira, whose loyalty to her northern kin remained, visited Malek under the guise of diplomacy. Their conversations were charged, layered with both political negotiation and unspoken tension. "You serve the empire loyally," she said one night, gazing across the moonlit harbor. "But do you serve your heart as well, or only the ambitions of kings?" Malek remained silent. He knew that feelings for her could complicate his mission, yet the pull was undeniable. Their alliance, fragile and fraught, mirrored the larger complexities of the world around them. Love, loyalty, and betrayal existing simultaneously. The northern clans made their first move in winter, when rivers froze and travel became treacherous. Small raiding parties appeared along the borderlands, striking isolated villages, sabotaging supply lines, and vanishing before imperial forces could respond. The intent was clear: test the empire's defenses. Malek coordinated swift naval responses, using rivers and coastal routes to transport troops quickly. Despite the harsh winter, he led his fleet with precision. Yet the raids continued, more audacious each time, culminating in a bold attack on a strategic city near the coast. The battle was fierce. Flames consumed warehouses, cries of civilians echoed through snowy streets, and chaos threatened to overwhelm the defenders. Malek, directing both land and sea forces, demonstrated ingenuity. Fireships set ablaze and guided by hidden currents. Archers from elevated platforms and coordinated counterattacks from hidden militia trained in Tyros methods. Korvan watched from afar, frustrated that his surprise had been countered. He realized that his own sons and chiefs, eager for personal glory, were acting independently. Tensions rose in his camp as blame shifted from one leader to another. After weeks of skirmishes, the northern advance stalled. Malek's leadership, combined with Naram's recovered strategic insight, had turned the tide. The Empire's people, once fearful, now rallied with determination, inspired by the courage and ingenuity displayed by both their commanders. Amid this turbulence, the Empire's scholars recorded events, aware that history demanded not just chronicles of kings, but of the unnamed sailors, soldiers, and citizens, whose courage and sacrifice shaped the fate of nations. In private chambers, Ardashir reflected on the lessons of his long reign. He had learned that love, loyalty, and betrayal were intertwined, that empires could be fortified by walls and weapons, but truly survived through trust, foresight, and adaptability. As winter thawed into spring, a temporary calm settled across the empire. But Korvan's ambition remained. Tyros' loyalties were tested, and within the palace, rivalries simmered beneath cordial faces. The ancient world, as Ardashir had known it, was no longer a place of simple battles and territorial expansion. It was a complex tapestry of love and ambition, of empire and resistance, of kings who sought to command fate and the ordinary men and women whose actions could shift the balance between triumph and ruin. The stage was set for the next great upheavals, where empires would be challenged not just by swords and ships, but by cunning, betrayal, and human desire. The story of kings and empires, of battles and alliances, of love and treachery, continued each thread woven into the tapestry of the ancient world, setting the stage for legends that would endure long after the names of those who first forged them faded into history. The spring following the northern raids brought uneasy prosperity to Ardashir's empire. The rivers, fed by melting snows, swelled once more, nourishing fields and filling granaries. Markets bustled with grain, silk, and cedar, and the streets of the capital shimmered under the bright sun. Yet beneath this veneer of stability, currents of tension flowed like hidden streams. Prince Naram, having recovered fully from his wound, took a more assertive role in the administration. He established a new council of regional governors, emphasizing efficiency and loyalty. Yet this centralization drew murmurs of dissent from older nobles, accustomed to autonomy. Among them, Lord Kiver of the Western Highlands quietly plotted, believing the empire had grown too strong. He believed Naram's ambitions could threaten the delicate balance of power. Malek, now celebrated as the hero of the coast, was invited to remain in the capital. He was to oversee the integration of maritime trade and military coordination. He found himself increasingly entangled in court politics, balancing the interests of Tyros, the emperor, and restless nobles. The prestige was intoxicating, but it came with subtle perils. Courtiers whispered of his growing influence. Rivals eyed him as both a foreign ally and a potential threat. Meanwhile, in the northern mountains, Korvan was not idle. Though his forces had been repelled, his spirit remained unbroken. He convened with new allies, tribal leaders from beyond the known frontiers, mercenaries, and exiled nobles. Together, they plotted a campaign, not only of raids, but of political destabilization. Korvan understood that the greatest victories often came from exploiting division within the enemy's own ranks. As summer arrived, Malek was dispatched with a fleet to escort grain shipments to Tyros. He was simultaneously monitoring potential northern infiltration. On the voyage, he received troubling intelligence. Spies within the empire had been feeding information to Korvan, detailing troop movements and fortifications. The realization was chilling. Enemies could now strike with precision, and loyalty within the empire itself could no longer be assumed. Alira returned once again, this time under the pretext of negotiating trade and alliances between northern clans and the empire. Her presence stirred conflicting emotions in Malek. He had long admired her intelligence and courage, yet he knew that her loyalties remained divided. "You trust too easily," she said one evening, watching the sun sink beneath the horizon. "Empires are sustained not by love, but by vigilance." The political tension in the empire escalated as Kyver and other nobles maneuvered to limit Naram's influence. Secret meetings, veiled threats, and subtle sabotage marked the corridors of power. In response, Naram tightened his control, cultivating a circle of loyal commanders and advisors, including Malek, whose reputation and naval skill lent weight to the prince's authority. In the northern highlands, Korvan prepared for his return, coordinating simultaneous strikes along multiple fronts. The plan was audacious. While small raiding parties would harass coastal towns and trade routes, a larger force would attempt a direct assault on one of the empire's fortified cities, aiming to draw out imperial forces. Scouts reported enemy movements before they could strike, allowing imperial garrisons to respond strategically. Yet the northern leaders proved cunning, feigning attacks and disappearing into forests and mountains, forcing Malek and his allies to adapt quickly. The fighting was relentless, testing both his naval tactics and his endurance. One engagement near the river delta became decisive. Korvan had dispatched raiders to seize a supply hub, intending to cripple the empire's food distribution. Malek anticipated this move, setting ambushes along the riverbanks and employing fireships to sow confusion. The battle was chaotic. Flames danced across water. Archers fired from hidden positions, and soldiers fought amidst the smoke and smoke-choked air. Korvan's forces suffered heavy losses, yet the battle revealed vulnerabilities within the empire's own leadership. Miscommunication among imperial commanders led to isolated units being overrun, and Malek realized that the internal rivalries he had witnessed in the capital were now manifesting on the battlefield. In the aftermath, Ardashir convened an extraordinary council. The emperor, now advanced in age, recognized that external threats could be managed, but internal betrayal was far more dangerous. He emphasized loyalty, vigilance, and the need to cultivate unity among his sons and the empire's governors. Amid this tension, Elira remained a constant, her presence a reminder that politics and personal emotion were inseparable. She warned Malek of Korvan's next moves, while subtly encouraging him to consider the human cost of empire. How soldiers, sailors, and civilians alike were pawns in the ambitions of kings and warriors. As autumn approached, the empire experienced a fragile peace. Trade routes resumed, northern raiders retreated, and the rivers carried life back to the fields. Yet Ardashir, sitting in his chambers and examining maps, understood that the stability was temporary. Loyalties were tested by ambition, love could cloud judgment, and betrayal could arise from the most unexpected quarters. Aware that the northern threat had not vanished but merely evolved, he trained crews in both naval combat and intelligence work, ensuring the next confrontation would be met with skill and foresight. In the capital, Ardashir prepared for the inevitable. He summoned his sons and most trusted advisors, laying out a vision that combined strategic foresight with moral authority. He spoke of alliances, justice, and the responsibility of leadership, emphasizing that power was not merely conquest, but the careful stewardship of a realm and its people. Beyond the mountains and seas, Korvan plotted. Tyros remained vigilant, and the empire's future balanced delicately between prosperity and peril. In the courts, on the battlefields, and among the rivers and seas that nourished the land, love, ambition, and betrayal continued to weave together the threads of the greatest stories of the ancient world. The stage was set for new conflicts, new alliances, and new tales of courage and cunning. The rulers and warriors, the merchants and sailors, and even those unknown to history, would all play their part in shaping the unfolding drama of kings, empires, betrayal, and love. The following winter brought a harsh cold that seeped into every corner of the empire, testing the strength of its people. It tested the resolve of its rulers. Snow blanketed the mountains where Korvan's clans had retreated. The rivers froze along their edges, creating both obstacles and opportunities for military strategy. Ardashir, in the twilight of his reign, spent long hours in his chambers, studying maps and reports from across his vast empire. He understood that northern raids had been repelled, but Korvan's ambitions remained a persistent threat. Ambitious nobles within his own court also posed a threat. Empires were vulnerable to deceit and rivalry. Prince Naram, recovering from an assassination attempt, began asserting more authority over the military and governors. He worked closely with Malek, whose naval intelligence had proven invaluable. Together, they devised plans. They planned to secure trade routes, reinforce border cities, and create rapid response units. Yet not all was strategic planning. Love and loyalty intertwined in unpredictable ways. Elira, loyal to her northern kin, maintained her bond with Malek. Their conversations grew more personal. She challenged him to see beyond the immediate threat, to consider the humanity of those caught between armies, civilians, sailors, and soldiers whose lives were shaped by choices made in palace chambers and council halls. Amid this, unrest simmered within the empire. Some governors, uncomfortable with Naram's growing influence, began covertly reaching out to Korvan or exploring alliances with other neighboring powers. Lord Kiva of the Western Highlands was particularly active, sending envoys with veiled promises and subtle threats. He sought to expand his own influence at the expense of the central authority. Recognizing the danger, Ardashir summoned his sons and Malek to a council in the imperial capital. The gathering was tense, a delicate balance of loyalty, ambition, and diplomacy. Ardashir emphasized that unity was essential for repelling external threats and maintaining internal stability. Strength alone is insufficient, he said. We must bind loyalty with trust and ambition with responsibility. Only then can our realm endure. Malek, speaking with the calm authority he had earned, proposed a plan to counter both northern and internal threats. Coastal fortresses would be reinforced and supplied with provisions to withstand sieges. Naval patrols would be expanded, creating a network capable of rapid communication and response. Intelligence networks would be formalized, integrating reports from merchants, sailors, and trusted courtiers. Most importantly, he suggested cultivating loyalty through respect and shared prosperity rather than fear or coercion. Naram approved these measures, though he remained wary of the loyalty of his governors. We cannot trust all who wear our banners, he said. Some seek only their own advancement. Winter passed slowly, and as spring returned, Korvan launched a calculated offensive. Unlike previous raids, this campaign was designed not for quick victories, but for long-term disruption. Small bands of northern warriors infiltrated border towns, inciting rebellion, sabotaging supply lines, and spreading rumors. Malek, commanding a fleet that patrolled both rivers and coast, intercepted several of these raiding parties. He employed strategies learned from years at sea ambushes, deception, and rapid maneuvering, turning the northern forces' cunning against them. Each skirmish was a test of endurance and intelligence, requiring not only skill, but also discipline and coordination among troops who had little experience with such tactics. In one decisive confrontation near a fortified river town, Malek deployed a combination of riverboats, hidden artillery, and cavalry to trap a northern detachment. The battle was intense, with soldiers fighting in mud-choked streets as fires spread along the town's edge. Ultimately, Malek's forces prevailed, capturing key leaders and securing the town, but at great cost. The northern clans proved resilient, willing to endure hardship for revenge. Within the empire, the winter's trials revealed cracks in loyalty. Certain governors had hesitated to send reinforcements, calculating the balance of power and the potential benefits of disorder. Malek and Naram worked quickly to address these internal betrayals, redistributing command and reinforcing trust. Meanwhile, Ardashir focused on the long-term future. He convened scholars, generals, and statesmen to document strategies, codify laws, and plan for succession. He understood that empires endured not only through conquest, but through knowledge, infrastructure, and the careful cultivation of loyalty and justice. Elira, observing the unfolding events, continued to challenge Malek. "You fight well," she said one night aboard his ship. "But do you consider the lives you cannot save?" Victory is not merely the absence of enemies. It is the presence of justice. Malek took her words to heart. In the aftermath of battles, he insisted on aid for civilians, reconstruction of destroyed towns, and fair treatment of prisoners. His approach earned respect among allies and even softened the enmity of some northern captives, who began to reconsider Korvan's leadership. By the following summer, the northern threat had been significantly reduced. Korvan's forces were fragmented, and his alliances weakened. Yet the emperor and his commanders understood that this was only temporary. Ambition, envy, and the desire for power would always produce new challenges. In the capital, Ardashir prepared for the next phase of his legacy. His sons, now seasoned by war and counsel, were beginning to take on greater responsibilities. Malek, though still an outsider in terms of birth, had become indispensable for his knowledge, courage, and foresight. Together, they represented the blending of human ingenuity, loyalty, and leadership that had allowed the empire to survive. Beyond the borders, Korvan plotted anew. Tyros strengthened its fleets, and the people of the empire remained caught in the currents of a world defined by ambition, love, loyalty, and betrayal. The stage was set for the next great chapter of the ancient world, one in which kings, empires, and those who served them would face challenges not only from enemies without, but from the complexities within their own hearts and courts. The empire had entered a period of uneasy equilibrium. Ardashir, though aged, remained vigilant. He understood that the survival of his realm depended on foresight as much as strength. His sons Naram, Lurvan, and Jasharich commanded portions of the empire. Though united under the emperor's vision, rivalries simmered quietly, as ambition rarely slumbered for long. Malek, having proven himself both at sea and in council, acted as a bridge between Ardashir's administration and maritime powers. He trained officers not merely in combat but in governance, teaching them to manage towns and negotiate alliances. Yet he remained aware of the fragile balance. One misstep, one betrayal, could unravel decades of careful planning. Meanwhile, Korvan, his power diminished but his resolve unbroken, forged new strategies. He understood that direct confrontation was perilous. Instead, he resorted to subterfuge, encouraging discontent within border towns. Malek was dispatched with troops and advisors to assess the situation, accompanied by envoys. Upon arrival, Malek found a complex web of grievances. Some villagers were oppressed, others manipulated by Korvan's agents. With careful diplomacy, he met with village elders, examined records, and addressed legitimate grievances. Where deception had been planted, he uncovered evidence and presented it, exposing Korvan's manipulations. By combining fairness with firmness, Malek restored order and earned the loyalty of the province. Back in the capital, Ardashir convened a council to address the broader implications. The strength of an empire, he said, is measured not only by the size of its armies, but by the hearts of its people. Loyalty cannot be enforced solely by fear. It must be cultivated with justice, respect, and opportunity. Naram, still wary of internal dissent, pushed for harsher measures, advocating for stricter control. Lurvan and Jashar, however, argued that heavy-handed tactics would breed resentment. Echoing Malek's successes, Ardashir listened carefully, weighing experience against ambition, before decreeing a balanced approach. As summer deepened, Korvan's influence continued to ripple outward. He secured alliances among northern tribes. Yet he faced frustration as the empire's intelligence networks intercepted correspondence and disrupted supply lines. Korvan grew increasingly desperate, realizing that direct rebellion against the empire might now result in disaster. It was during this time that Illyra returned to the capital. Her presence brought both political and personal complexity. She had negotiated on behalf of northern clans, but she had also come to respect Malek's integrity and wisdom. In private conversation, she warned him of Korvan's next scheme, a coordinated strike aimed at imperial authority. By inciting rebellion in a key city while disrupting trade, Korvan hoped to create chaos. Malek, understanding the gravity of the threat, proposed preemptive measures. Patrols were increased along trade routes, local militias were trained, and intelligence operatives embedded. Malek also advised open communication with the provinces, ensuring rumors were met with swift investigation. In late summer, the northern plots began to manifest. An uprising erupted in a wealthy city. Supply convoys were ambushed, and messages intercepted, suggesting collusion with influential nobles. Panic threatened to spread. Malek acted decisively. He coordinated a rapid response, reinforcing the besieged city. His presence on the battlefield inspired both imperial troops and local defenders, demonstrating leadership. The rebellion was contained through diplomacy, intelligence, and military precision. Malek's efforts exposed conspirators, revealing Korvan's limited influence. By punishing only the guilty while protecting innocents, Malek maintained the empire's moral authority. In the aftermath, Ardashir recognized that the empire had reached a critical juncture. The successes of Malek and Naram highlighted the importance of adaptability, intelligence, and unity. Yet the persistent threats, both external and internal, reminded the emperor that vigilance must never wane. The court, though restored to order, remained a place of intrigue. Ardashir's sons navigated ambition and loyalty. Malek, still an outsider by birth, had become indispensable as both commander and diplomat. Elira's presence added further complexity, representing both former enemies and fragile alliances. As autumn approached, the empire celebrated its resilience. Rivers carried life to the fields, markets thrived, and the soldiers and sailors who had defended the realm were honored. Yet everyone understood that peace was temporary, a pause between challenges. Ambition, rivalry, love, and betrayal, these forces would continue to shape the empire's destiny. In quiet moments, Ardashir reflected on the lessons of his reign. The greatest empires were not merely built on conquest, but on the careful cultivation of loyalty. And even as he grew older, he understood that the next generation would inherit both triumphs and perils. The stage was set for new conflicts, new alliances, and new stories of courage and cunning, as the empire faced the ever-present challenge of preserving power, justice, and legacy amidst turbulent currents. The winter that followed was unusually harsh, with snow blanketing the plains and mountains alike. Even the rivers, long relied upon to sustain crops and commerce, slowed beneath sheets of ice. Yet the empire endured. Ardashir, though now in the final years of his reign, remained alert. He understood that the stability of an empire was as fragile as a frozen river in spring. His sons Naram and Jashar continued to grow into their roles as leaders. Naram, seasoned by war and diplomacy, sought to consolidate power among the governors. Lavan, more scholarly, focused on the administration of trade, culture, and law. Jashar, younger and more impulsive, commanded frontier territories, defending against raiders. Malek, ever vigilant, maintained the empire's naval strength and intelligence networks. His experience navigating both the open seas and the treacherous waters of politics had made him indispensable. He remained aware that enemies, both within and without, would never cease plotting. Loyalty could be fleeting, and ambition often disguised itself as duty. Korvan, the northern warlord, had not been idle. Though weakened, he continued to scheme. He used deception, alliances, and the promise of wealth to stir unrest. His strategy shifted from direct military confrontation to subversion, bribing minor officials, spreading rumors of imperial corruption, and enticing disaffected nobles. The threat was subtle, invisible to those untrained in the ways of cunning and intrigue. Elira, now deeply entwined in both political and personal ties, continued to act as a mediator. Her loyalty to her northern kin remained, yet her respect for Malek and the empire influenced her actions. She navigated a delicate balance, seeking to prevent open conflict while ensuring her people retained dignity. The turning point came in early spring. Reports arrived that a coalition of northern clans had gathered, secretly supported by discontented nobles. They planned a coordinated strike near the border. Their intent was to seize key fortresses, disrupt trade, and challenge the emperor's heirs. The complexity of the plot required immediate action. Malek, in consultation with Naram and the provincial governors, devised a multi-layered strategy. Scouts were dispatched to monitor enemy movements, while fortifications along vulnerable borders were reinforced. Trade convoys were rerouted or accompanied by military escorts. Most importantly, Malek worked to expose the internal conspirators, using intelligence networks. Korvan's coalition suffered heavy losses. Many of his leaders were captured or killed. His influence among the northern clans waned. The internal conspirators were revealed and punished. The victory solidified the empire's internal stability and demonstrated the effectiveness of foresight, discipline, and intelligence combined with military strength. In the aftermath, Ardashir reflected on the empire he had nurtured. He recognized that his legacy would not be measured solely by battles won or territories gained, but by the institutions he had established, the alliances he had forged, and the loyalty he had cultivated. He saw that true power required both strength and wisdom, force and justice, courage and compassion. Malek returned to Tyros briefly to oversee maritime trade and naval readiness, ensuring that the empire's prosperity continued alongside its security. Alira accompanied him for part of the journey, their relationship now tempered by mutual respect and trust. Their bond symbolized the complex interplay of love, loyalty, and duty that defined the era. As Ardashir's life approached its natural conclusion, he summoned his sons and key advisors. He spoke not only of governance and strategy, but of the principles that should guide the empire: justice, foresight, vigilance, and respect for both allies and subjects. He emphasized that ambition, while necessary for action, must be tempered with wisdom, and that betrayal, though ever present, could be mitigated by fairness and foresight. When Ardashir passed peacefully, the empire mourned a leader who had shaped its destiny. His sons assumed leadership, guided by his teachings and supported by trusted generals and advisors. The empire faced new challenges, as all realms do, but it was fortified by the lessons of experience. Korvan, though diminished, continued to exist on the fringes, a reminder that vigilance must never cease. Tyros and other allied states maintained their alliances, strengthened by mutual respect and shared history. The rivers, once the lifeblood of the empire, continued to flow, sustaining the land and the people. The greatest stories of the ancient world of kings, empires, betrayal, love, and courage had unfolded. Thus concluded this chapter of history, leaving behind a tapestry of heroes, villains, lovers, and leaders, whose lives shaped the ancient world in ways both profound and enduring, setting the stage for generations yet to come.